In today's video, we're featuring Jason Della Rocca of Execution Labs. He's going to show us how to burn up in flames, speed to failure. We'll learn how to dump an idea before it gets worse and to work out the kinks and make it better. Listen up and learn.
So my name is Jason Della Rocca. I'm the co-founder of Execution Labs, which is a hybrid incubator and accelerator focused on mobile games and supporting startups in the game industry specifically. This notion of failure is super important in startups, but also in business in general. And the faster you can fail, the better off you are, meaning you want to learn quickly if you're headed down the wrong path. And so being able to course correct on a more rapid pace is really the goal of a startup. Like when you're in that conceptualization phase and figuring out what you're doing, you want to learn quickly if you're going to fail. And it's human tendency to actually try to do it in the longer phases, meaning you have all this uncertainty, so you want to take more time to plan, more time to think about it, more time to build and do, and then you end up, failing down the road as opposed to much sooner. And so, as entrepreneurs, you have to be fearless in a sense. You have to be willing to push yourself to test whether or not you're going to fail or sort of pass the failure stage, so that you can learn that today or tomorrow as opposed to a year from now, so that you can adjust and course correct. As a startup, this idea of accelerating the pace with which you can fail, and in turn, of course, that means learn, is a very important element of being an entrepreneur. I mean, I see failure as a way of experimentation. If you're experimenting to discover what's going to succeed or what's going to stick, naturally you're going to end up with these situations where things aren't going to stick. And just sort of being in this constant mode of pushing boundaries, of testing the envelope, of experimenting and exploring, you will just naturally end up in states of failure. You have to be able to recognize that quickly, and then learn from those failures so that you can adjust and sort of move in slightly different directions. And from what I've seen, those entrepreneurs that have the courage to jump off the cliff, to test if they're going to sink or swim or fly or whatever is the right, you know what I mean. Have the courage to sort of test themselves to discover whether or not they're going to fail or succeed. In many ways, I mean, it is another demonstration of that leadership. And what I've seen is that the team members are even more willing to follow those leaders that have that courage. And so, again, for entrepreneurs that are willing to sort of test themselves and face those failures and admit and kind of course correct and move on, I would say is a great leadership skill, and actually is a better way to kind of keep the team engaged as opposed to in this sort of state of denial. There's a story that I like to tell that comes from a book called Where Great Ideas Come From. And it's a story about a particular water fly or river fly called a daphnia. And what's fascinating about the daphnia is that under stable conditions where there's food and no predators and all is good and there's water and stuff, they don't have sex to reproduce. They just clone themselves. Why do they do this? Because if they're surviving and living a great life, then an exact clone of themselves will survive just as well. Now, when the environment is disrupted, when a new predator is introduced, or there's a drought, or the food supply is low, there's a state of uncertainty and disruption, they start having sex. It's because they want to introduce error or failure into the reproductive process, right? They want to combine DNA, and through that DNA combination process, you have mutations, adaptions, errors, and so on, with the hope that one of those adaptions or one of those mutations or errors is better suited to the new ecosystem or new environment. It's a different color, so the new predator can't see it, or it needs less water to survive, or whatever the case may be. But it does that on a very grand scale, right? So you need billions of mutations or billions of errors to discover the one thing that's going to succeed in this sort of state of disruption. And so, I mean, when I read that, I thought it was totally fascinating and really applied to the sort of context of entrepreneurship, where we are dealing in an ecosystem or a context of uncertainty, of disruption, of things changing, and new technology and new platforms and ways of doing business and interacting with human beings. All this kind of stuff is a state of uncertainty. And the best way to discover success in a state of uncertainty is to have as many, call it mutations, as possible. Right? Many adaptions. You have to introduce errors into your discovery process to find out which are the things that are going to be better suited to survive in that new environment. And so in this state of uncertainty, really failure is the only viable way to discover success. We're not dealing in a stable environment where we can just sort of clone or copy paste someone else's business model or copy paste and clone someone else's product. We really have to experiment and explore and sort of push those boundaries. And just by the very nature of it, that means you're going to fail a lot. And in so doing, that's how you discover success.